Hello, everyone, and welcome to the TTV Modcast, episode 15.
Oh yeah, it's great.
It's gonna be such an amazing party, eh, Slime?
Yeah, I am waving my hands in the air like I just do not care.
So, it's me, Waj.
It's me, a Slime.
And it's me, Lego Master.
So, we're doing the keyword Bionicle Generation the First. And this is part 2 of our, well, it was a trilogy previously, but now we're doing the same thing that Hollywood's doing with all their trilogies, is we're making it not a trilogy. So it's going to be a 4-part series. So this episode will just cover the Metru Nui Saga, which is 04 to 05. And then we'll have an episode on the Ignition trilogy, and an episode on the last years of Bionicle with Barra Magna.
And Spheres Magna as well. Also, in case you're not aware, Ignition Trilogy is 06, 07, and 08. So speaking of Bionicle Generation 1, how about that Bionicle year 2004 through 2005, which introduced the Toa Metru in 2004? What did you guys think of the Toa Metru? I really liked the Toa Metru. Did you like the Toa Metru?
How did you like the Toa Metru, Slime?
I don't know. I mean, they were pretty innovative for their time, combining posability with function. Pretty much they're the only generation sets that do that well, in a sense. I'm not completely sold on their design, specifically with the shoulders. I don't like the angle that they're at and all that. But as far as like combining gear function with a level of posability, it's definitely something that they innovated.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like, we had talked about neck articulation in the first of our Bionicle Generation episodes, which is episode 11, and the Metru were the first time that neck articulation really became a thing for Toa sets, and the way that the heads connected basically set the groundwork for the rest of the years. So it was a really influential year, basically, 2004, at least in terms of the Toa Metru.
I would say that the other thing about the Metru is, compared to the Mata and the Nuva, they were much more humanoid, I found. Some of their proportions were a little bit wonky, but overall they kind of were the first real show of a shift towards more humanoid proportions, because when you really look at the Mata and the Nuva, their proportions are completely off when you try to compare it with like normal human proportions, whereas the Metru looked a little bit more human, and I'd say a little bit more hero-esque. Like, I think that the Metru for me are the most hero-ish looking Toa that we've gotten. That's why, like, say, I've reused the Metru build a lot on my own mocks, because it looks very heroic. It looks like what a Toa should look like to me, despite the lack of articulation.
Yeah, I see your point.
That is really interesting, because, like, especially the Toa Nuva, if you weren't told that these guys are, like, the heroes of Bionicle, then it's like, especially I think of Tahu Nuva, just the whole mask kind of looks a bit villainous. The Toa Metru have something about them. Maybe it's just the amount of armor that they have, or like their whole body is basically encased. Their chest plate is really well integrated with their torso.
They became more consistent in terms of that kind of sci-fi-ish almost concept of having kind of an under armor or an undersuit, and having armor placed all around the kind of strategic locations onto the suit, if that makes any sense. To me, it looks like the Metru really are wearing kind of like either skin or a body glove, depending on how you want to look at it, and then they just have all of the armor placed logically on top of it. And I think that's something that they kind of lost in later years with the color coordination. Some of the color coordination on the later, like, Inika builds, to me, doesn't feel as solid and uniform as the Metru did.
That's true, because the Metru, pretty much all of them have 2 colors that they use as their primary colors, and that's the Metru color of whatever, Vakama has is red, and then the gray underneath.
What do you guys think of the Metru's colors? A lot of people say that, oh, they're too dark, they're, too dreary, and they're just too flat and boring.
Crawling in my skin. Yeah, but like, I don't know. I like the Metru's colors really a lot. Really a lot. Like, yeah, sure, they're like darker and grittier, like edgy, the Batman. Darkness, no pants, and all that. I don't know, I just like them a lot. Something that I didn't mention earlier about the Metru's builds, what I really like about them is that you're able to change the proportions of the torso, if only subtly, but
You're
definitely
right.
noticeably. And it does kind of ruin the proportions a bit, but like, it makes sense. Like, Manua has a shorter torso because, he's supposed to be shorter and stockier, and Nuju has a longer torso because he's meant to be like taller and more intellectual or whatever. It's like the same thing with Kama, if I remember correctly. And like the only thing that would have been helped by is having different limbs, but I still think that small amount of customizability is really, really cool. Because they're not exact clone sets, unlike all the Nuva and Mata.
Well, I would say they're almost more clone sets than the Nuva and the Borak, because they all have that same core, like, dark gray color.
I guess, but like you look at them and they're all so distinct from each other. Maybe that's just me.
Maybe it's the masks.
Yeah,
I don't know.
What did you guys think of the masks? The masks of the Metru are honestly some of my favorite out of all of Bionicle. Maybe I'm speaking biasedly because I use Nuju's mask. No, I'm not speaking biasedly because I didn't even have Nuju Metru for like until 2014. But like, especially Winua's mask, it's just so good. It's like all of them are just so good and unique, and you can really use them for different characters too. Because like some masks, it's like okay, this works for that character, but now it's just that character. Like the Red How, for example, is very difficult to use that for anything that's not something that's Tahu related.
Yeah.
Just because it's become so synonymous with Tahu.
Up until really recently, I did not like the Metru, partly because I felt like the masks looked kind of dead to me. Like maybe it was the way that some of the eyes were sculpted in some of them, but they didn't look, I don't know, they didn't look very, I think it's Nokama's and Matau's are like the biggest problem for me. There's something about them, I've gotten over it, but it doesn't seem alive like other masks do. They don't seem as expressive, especially as other masks. That's my main thing. They're not nearly as expressive as some of the masks that came earlier or came later.
Yeah, I'd say definitely I think that Nokama's is the weakest, not only because it totally breaks the color scheme, but also because the shaping of it is weird. Like the way those two fins jut down from the bottom, that kind of makes posing it awkward and like
random you can't see your eye color.
Yeah, that too. Like the light piping is just non-existent. It's like they tried to do the same thing they did with Gali Mata, but it just didn't work. It's like Nokama has a Tupperware mask. Is what it is.
Yeah, I can see that, yeah.
2004 overall, though, the Metru were pretty solid. And then we had the Matoran sets as well, which weren't as good.
I like them. I love those masks.
Yeah, masks are pretty good.
The masks are all right, but they're just so flat. And
okay, they are really flat, yeah.
And like the neck articulation isn't there, and like...
Are they a step down? In your guys' minds from the other three?
Absolutely. I don't know how my opinion stands with other community members, but definitely 03 is probably one of my favorite years for Matoran. The builds were a little awkward, yes, but I just really like them. I don't know why, but the Metrutoran are just like pancakes with torsos and like stubby legs, and like they can't really pose the legs well, and like you can't really pose the arms well, and it's like even the masks have limited reusability because of the dual injected molds, whereas the 03 Matoran, they're all the uniform color.
I see where you're coming from. For me, I'm probably biased because I'm actually making all of the Metru Matoran as Metru Toa, because I really like those colors. So I'm basically making like all of the Toa with silver and whatever that Metru Matoran's accent was. And so I'm biased. I'm really biased. But how about Metru Nui itself?
The setting of Metru Nui was pretty cool. Actually, it kind of reminds me of our discussion of Korra last week, where we were talking about how with Atla, it was more of a naturalistic setting, and for Korra, it was more industrialized. And so that kind of parallelism is true of the transition from 01 to 03 and 04 to 05, because it's more like a futuristic cityscape, basically. That's Metru Nui. It actually, I thought, fit better than the naturalistic setting, in my opinion. They are these biomechanical robots, basically, and like it kind of makes sense that they would live in like a more futuristic setting. It just seemed to fit better. Plus, we had the movie that they showed off the whole city, or the whole island of Metru Nui.
The thing with Legends of Metru Nui for me is that I almost prefer several of the storylines from the books, especially when it came to the Vahki. I know that, like, set-wise, the Vahki aren't the greatest. They have some limited posability, but I really like just certain aspects of their character in terms of their overall appearance, but also the idea of them in the canon is very interesting to me because it's this idea of like a police force that is uncompromising. You know, they uphold the law of Metru Nui, and the Matoran fear that. This police force that aren't sympathetic, they don't compromise, they don't give leeway here and there when it's deserved. It's just a very brutal, almost not quite totalitarian, but quasi, especially when Makuta's control of Turaga Doom comes in, the Vahki became very interesting for me. And I'm just kind of sad that we never really got to see them more in visual media. It's also because I found they were a good horde villain that the Toa could actually go like up against, kind of in terms of hand-to-hand combat, which we never really could have gotten with the Borak or even really the Rakshi. So I don't know. I really enjoyed the Vahki for a lot of reasons, and I found they were kind of underused in the movie because they're half of the sets, really. Like, this entire canister wave that we got was not really a central part of the story at all. But it's, again, a personal bias because I like the Vahki.
Also, we got the Titans, which are really cool sets. You know, Kreka and Nadiki and Turaga Doom and Nivak.
The Dark Hunters were cool. That concept that they introduced, and correct me if I'm wrong, but 2004 is really when we got kind of glimpses of the larger Bionicle universe.
Kind of, yeah.
So, like,
04 is really where the story started getting picked up a little more, because Farshti didn't start writing the books until the last one. And speaking of the Bionicle book series, how about that book that came out in 2005, Time Trap? How do you guys like that?
I read Time Trap recently. It was interesting. It's definitely one of the most interesting Bionicle books, because I found that the Bionicle books ranged from being kind of repetitive, even like with the masks in the initial kind of Metru Nui Saga, and even with the Kanoka discs for Metru Nui. But for Time Trap, that was a really interesting deviation. Although, correct me if I'm wrong, but did it have a real impact on the actual story?
Depends on what you mean by the actual story, but like, as far as does it impact Vakama at all? No. Does it impact Makuta at all? Not really.
I haven't read Time Trap. The only Adventures book that I have read is the first one, and I actually remember this. I think I was in 5th grade, and we had like a bookshelf in our school, and so I just like picked out, I was like, oh, I'm into Bionicle, and there was like the first volume, and I think it goes to show that those years were pretty popular. Bionicle was pretty mainstream at that point, it seemed. For 01 and to 03, you know, they were the new thing, but 04, especially with that movie, which people generally tend to like a lot more than Mask of Light, it seemed like they were showing up everywhere. For 2005, though, that year wasn't really regarded as that great. Like, it took a lot of interesting turns, especially with the Hordika build. I don't know, what did you guys think of the Hordika?
I never owned any of the Hordika, but they had some cool parts.
They have some interesting parts, but nearly all of them are unusable.
Okay, yeah, proportionally there.
No, because, like, okay, it comes with the Recolor 2001 limb. That's cool. It only comes with one of them. Those legs, I have never, ever been able to use Toa Hordika legs in a way that didn't look awkward. They just don't look good. Like, they work for the Hordika, I guess, because they're supposed to be, like, mutated, but for anything else that's, like, normal, you just can't use them. And then, like, the arm with the gear function, like, that's a cool concept, but it's, like, you can't use that part for anything else.
Yeah, those Ratuka launchers, though, those were fun.
Ratukas were fun. I could never aim them, but they were definitely fun to just, like, 3, 2, 1, let it rip to steal a line from Beyblade, probably. I don't know. I didn't follow Beyblade. But Ratuka were fun, but like the rest of them, it's just like, and their weapons weren't that great. I will say the only Hordika I have is Nuju, who I consider whose weapons are probably the most usable. Maybe, I don't know, maybe not. I don't know.
All of them are just dual molded and weird, kind of. They're very irregular shapes. Kind of like the Metru, I found. Like the most of the Metru's weapons I don't think are very reusable.
yeah, like, other than maybe Mattel's Arrow Slicers.
Yeah, those are relatively generic, but how about the Visorak?
I really like the whole, you press down on their back and it crunches mandibles together. It was one of like my favorite function.
I actually never got any of the Visorak sets, though I got one of the big system sets that they had, and it came with like this one giant Visorak that had like a fortress on its back. Yeah, so the Visorak, or that one Visorak that I had, was really cool.
I really like the Visorak aesthetically as well, and I think it's because I just really like all of the promotional material from 2004 and 2005. I feel like the look that they had going for Bionicle in those years was really, really cool. Both with the Metru, with, you know, the urban cityscape kind of Metru Nui, and then for 2005 they had all those webs, all kind of the green corrupted looking stuff. It was just a very interesting thing aesthetically on most of the promotional material, which for someone like me who didn't really get the sets when I was younger, that's how I experienced Bionicles, through all of these like pictures and catalogs and stuff. I just think that the marketing team did a really good job in those years. How about the '05 finale, kind of, and everything that happened with, you know, Kitangu and Sidorak and Hordika? How did you guys feel about that?
I haven't read any of the books, but at least from the movie, it kind of seemed a bit anticlimactic, even though there was this huge war going on, or like there's hordes of Visorak, and they're fighting the Toa, and they were all getting encircled, at least from what I can recall, and then Kitangu's like climbing up some wall, and then bashes Sidorak in the face or something. I don't know. It's been a while. I don't know. It overall seemed kind of anticlimactic.
Like I said, I don't really remember the movie very well. In the book, it's probably worse than in the movie. The book is pretty terrible when it comes to like that final battle sequence.
Overall, in general, I'd say that I seem to remember Time Trap being a nice conclusion to everything, being a good transition to the whole '01. It seemed like a good way to connect the two series. It was a good way to like say, okay, this is why Makuta has risen, and it's like, oh, but he's still here in the past. Like, what happened? Did he get beat up? In my own opinion, going to do a prequel, I mean, I guess it was probably already in the plan for Lego to like go back and say this is how the story all began, but I don't know. It seems like to me if Metru Nui, the Metru Nui Saga, was a sequel instead of a prequel, it would be a lot easier to digest.
You guys think it didn't really work that well as kind of a...
No, I mean, it did, but as a small child, it was still, I could find it confusing, and I could see where others could find it confusing in some aspects.
I don't know, this is just me speculating, but they probably didn't have it planned. Like, any Lego line is, like, for 3 years, basically. Any extended years, they have to come up with new stuff. I've seen the whole tendency towards prequels. It seems like prequels are pretty popular. Perhaps it's easier to go back and explain stuff that wasn't really explained in the story that we got with '01 and '03, which they did, which some could argue that, like, it loses that mystery aspect that we were talking about in the first episode.
To draw a Star Wars comparison, because I mean, Star Wars is one franchise where people often criticize the prequel content for getting rid of some of the mystery. But I'm just thinking somewhat in the prequels, but also just in terms of all of the other ancillary content, all of the supplemental content they've been releasing for Star Wars ever since they kind of did the canon reboot. I feel like that kind of material works best when it's enhancing what you already know and love. Say for Star Wars, there's some comics, there's some books that enhance the original trilogy and how we see the original trilogy. But the thing with 2004, 2005 is that it didn't really change the way that I'd say we saw the original Bionicle trilogy, like the Metru Nui Saga. It didn't really change that much about the characters, and like it explained some things and they were able to do some interesting tie-ins. But overall, do you think that it really added anything to the initial Bionicle story as a prequel?
I think for the evolution of the Toa from Matoran to Toa to Turaga, for that aspect I thought it worked. But the entire story of '05 I thought was unnecessary. It was pretty much filler. The whole city of Metru Nui kind of brought a whole lot of question marks to me as a child. It's like, is this the same island, or is it like a different island? So they had all these futuristic buildings, and now they don't like, why can't they recreate that technology? I mean, I guess they don't have the resources, but like, I mean, they had jobs, right? They had their whole like different occupations, and I forget what they were, but it's like they could probably facilitate like or create some new advanced technology. But I guess that's the whole retconning thing, and it's like they're not gonna do that. But it would have been cool.
It seems so weird to have a prequel be more quote-unquote modern than the thing that it's coming after. It's a weird situation. Obviously, it makes sense because, like, oh, we put in the Matoran in spheres, so we forget everything. Conveniently. Thank you, Greg. Thank you for that. That's one of the reasons that I thought that it was just kind of weird. But I mean, I guess that's one of the reasons that we all like Bionicle so much, is that it makes, at least Generation 1, makes a lot of things needlessly complicated.
Yes, and we'll experience some of that needless complications in our later episodes. So look forward to that. And that was the Modcast. So, goodbye, everyone.